Okay, so we've heard about several different aspects of open finance, ranging from pay later to the insurtech stack, and now the API banking capability. So it brings to mind a question: how do you actually build businesses out of this? And what's a good framework for thinking about how to build fintech businesses? So I'm very pleased to invite Kartik Swaminathan. He's the founder of Fantastic. And Kartik, you're gonna help wrap up this track by showing us a framework for how we actually uh, construct businesses around this.
Correct, John. In fact, when I was hearing the other speakers and the other tracks, so I was really enjoying the fact that it ties up so wonderfully well in terms of the framework I'm going to talk about, and you exactly gave the correct introduction, and it ties up well. So happy to present my framework to your visitors and audience here. I
Great.
can start.
Over to
Great,
you.
great. Uh, very good afternoon to you all. I'm here, as John mentioned, to present to you about this innovative framework called 3F Future FinTech Framework, which is nothing but a vision to simplify understanding, foster innovation, and accelerate growth in FinTech. And there is a purpose I mentioned this because with a lot of stuff happening, a lot of action happening, you need simplification, right? With the era of low code, no code, and non techies entering this side, and you talk about design, UI, right? You need to simplify everything. So that's the reason I said simplify understanding and fostering innovation. Why I say that is, so innovation has been happening for ages, right? It's not something new, but of innovation is also a culture. So you need to foster innovation, you need to share, collaborate, and do a lot of stuff. So that's why fostering innovation. And finally, accelerate growth. So like innovation, growth growth has been happening, right? Be it business, be it your individual growth, your organization growth, product growth, everything has been happening, but the world today requires you to accelerate this growth, and that's how this framework is basically born. And we will quickly look at, given the time allotted, we'll quickly look at the three core frameworks. We'll directly dive into those and understand how this framework helps in terms of all that probably been discussed and some new ideas. So very quickly, a brief about myself. I am a founder at Fantastic, where I largely look into product and go-to-market consulting in the fintech space. I recently authored this framework, which is called 3F Future FinTech Framework, and I obviously have a flavor of a lot of this in my consulting, and specifically aim to do 3F Edge orientation program or workshops based on that. And over 2 decades of experience across innovative products, having handled various stakeholders. The reason I'm highlighting this aspect is today, I think stakeholder management in terms of the complexity, be it your business, be it your design teams, be it your vendors, be it your internal stakeholders, be it your development team, the complexities are plenty and you need to orchestrate that well. And that's one of the reasons why a project probably succeeds or fails, besides the technical reasons and other aspects. And I have seen and orchestrated this across various stakeholders and seen the ideation cycle. And based on that, I basically ended up creating this framework. So let's begin with this famous quote from Steve Jobs, wherein he said famously that companies need to first define the customer experience or user journeys and then work backwards on applying technologies. Today, this is reverse. Funnily, this quote is almost 2.5 decades old. It's not a new quote. So, not that people are not aware of it. The problem was all these years, though we've had new concepts and frameworks emerge, there is still not a framework which will help you create a very good customer experience and a user journey very specifically. You have various frameworks to empathize, understand customer, design a product well. For example, design thinking helps you do that, but there is no framework which actually talks about creating a user journey, because it's basically a collection of various user journey which make a functionality feature, and those collections make a product, process, or a solution, right? So the lowest common denominator of everything is a user journey. And so one of my core frameworks is fintech digital life cycle, which primarily targets at creation of a engaging user journey. What I did was I came to a conclusion after a lot of analysis, study, experience of having implemented various projects, observed various other projects. I came to a conclusion that any product process solution, and obviously the lowest denominator being the user journey, can be broken up and covered in these 7 stages. What are those 7 stages? So everything begins with the acquisition of customers. So you acquire a customer, and then finally this will lead to offboarding of customers, right? Quite logical. And that's where I put a lot of emphasizing in simplifying the framework, so that a non-techie kind of a audience can also understand, because as I said, the whole orchestra is involvement of technology and non-technology people, and then the experience get created as a product or solution for the customer. So what is this acquisition and offboarding? So when you, let's say we talk about acquisition, so acquisition can be as simple as your KYC AML or your marketing. It could be pertaining to the specific incentive based code which can happen. So there are various perspectives. So there could be regulations, there could be technology, and various other handshakes involved with respect to acquisition. So how do you streamline that, reduce friction, and improvise it? So that's acquisition. Offboarding, as I said, it may look logical, but then within offboarding it's not simple, because especially in a fintech and digital environment, offboarding can involve some aspects pertaining to compliance, frauds. There could be charges involved, there could be some regulatory obligations involved by offboarding, or there could be even a marketing angle involved in offboarding. So I cover all that. In a digital environment, unless you touch upon all these things, you are not actually doing justice or enhancing your offering to your customer. That's where this basically ties in. Then comes the remaining stages. So after you acquire a customer, you always end up securing the customer. Obviously, securing, a lot of it is mandated by regulations. There can be real privacy issues around it, and comfort issues. But more important, in a digital and fintech environment, security is not just a technology or a regulatory feature. Security is important to build trust, because without trust, this ecosystem will not be empowered, or the participation will be less, right? So how do you build trust? So that's where I talk about various layers in which you can build security. So something as simple as a password can be security. It could be a feature level security like changing limits. It could be something like encryption. There could be features like device lock. So I cover all that there. Then I move on to engage. So once you have acquired a customer, you secure him, make him comfortable, build that trust, which is an ongoing process. Then you engage with him. How do you engage? There are various ways. The engagement can happen to content, it can happen to tools, calculators. There can be various other mechanisms through which you can constantly engage, incentivize, and interact with him. Then you move on to something called transact, where I basically try to cover very specific aspects pertaining to enabling and empowering transaction with things like contextual call to action, because you cannot delay a transaction, because a person needs stuff instantly in a digital world, right? So everything you design has to be based on contextual call to action. And then obviously there are few more aspects as part of this 7 stage and 39 sub stages which I discussed. Once a customer transacts, you need to grow the relationship. How do you grow that relationship? For example, you can do cross sell and upsell, and there are various other mechanisms which are required in the digital world which will help you do that, right? So how do you bring that digital nativeness and engagement and compliance and profitability, everything built into a framework, and ensure that everyone, including your employees and customers, are engaged with it? So that's grow. And then service. Eventually, it's a service business, especially the financial world. So how do you service your customer? So things like chatbot, doing surveys for customers, these are all digital native things, and I weave it with a thought process. So I tell you, based on my observation, where are areas where things are falling short, where are gaps which you can improvise on, and the likes of those. And all these, which is acquire, secure, engage, transact, grow, service, and offboard, 7 stages and 39 substages constitute what I call as a fintech digital life cycle. And this is basically nothing but a tech and product agnostic 7 stage, 39 substages framework or a model which helps you set a direction for innovation and creating engaging user journeys. And the beauty is, it's a iterative process because you'll obviously work under some constraints, budgets, technology and stuff like that, time frames. So you'll keep iterating and improvising and reduce the friction. And the more frictionless you make the stages, the more smoother is the journey. The more smoother is the journey, the better engaged the customer is. The better engaged the customer is, he'll trade, transact, engage better. He will. There'll be a higher. You can go to a higher share of wallet, a higher LTV, and better NPS. This is what most organizations in the digital space aspire for, and logically that will lead to better profitability. So this is one of my core frameworks, and I basically spent a good amount of time explaining you to the core part of the framework called FDLC. There are two other frameworks which overall cover the innovation capability in the new age, and I'll quickly take you through the remaining two. So before that, um, this is from yours truly, wherein I have experienced that most digital projects encounter difficulties or even fail because there is lack of clarity in the requirement and poor collaboration between stakeholders. Obviously, there are various other issues which can be technical in nature, but the intent is not to get into all that. The intent is to fill in that gap which will ensure that a projects actually succeed, right? Because at any given point of time, you have some level of technology to do work most efficiently, right? So assuming that, how do you improve, bring clarity in requirement and enhance the collaboration between stakeholders? And that can happen through some one framework which I very quickly will take you through, called Fintech Logical Architecture, or FLAIR, which is nothing but a simplified 14 block or layered architecture which will categorize various functionalities in these 14 blocks. So what happens is, the moment I've categorized functionalities across these 14 blocks, uh, your mind starts to work whenever you're defining a requirement, be it in any new form. It can be a BRD, and I think the earlier speaker did mention that the era of BRDs and FRDs are over, and new forms of documentation, obviously. So all that can keep evolving and emerging. But when you are defining a functionality, you need to keep all these aspects in mind. What are those? For example, there's core layer, there's data layer, there is a security layer, there is an API management layer. The earlier speaker spoke of the need to manage API availability, API orchestration, right? So there are various things. How do you monetize your APIs? So all that needs to be factored in when you do, because this is the new age. Then there is a layer where you can manage personalization, the front end, right? And all these aspects get considered as part of the fintech logical architecture. It helps you with respect to your documentation. It serves as a bridge in terms of collaboration between a non-techie and a techie and various other stakeholders, and eventually fostering collaboration. And there's one key thing which I think, as many of you are technical in background, even in industry people, you'll realize that core systems are becoming hollow. There is a redefining of core happening in every business. This framework will gradually consider all that, because you can gradually shift all the functionalities to the other 14 logical layers from the core layer. For example, when you transfer money, though the processing may happen at the core layer, but you transfer money today through a third party app. You may not be even touching a banking app directly. So gradually, a lot of these functionalities are getting pushed to external layers, and all those concepts and the way the ecosystem is evolving will be considered and will be accommodated as part of this 14 block logical architecture. And as I said, Flare will evolve. It will support incremental additions for at least another decade plus. This will be very stable. So that's as far as the second framework called fintech logical architecture is concerned. Now, this brings me to a very third issue, which is very famously highlighted by Indira Gandhi, who said that you cannot shake hands with a clenched fist. You need to open your fist. You need to open up. Correct. And when I say open, this brings me to my third part of the framework, which is called Fintech API Marketplace. Unless you create an open API marketplace, I think the earlier presentations did touch upon API marketplaces, which are emerging. But for this to be really very effective, we need to head to a API marketplace where you can simply pick, choose, configure, test, buy, put it as part of a workflow and publish. Right, this is precisely how even a non-techie can create a website today. This, how you typically will take a WordPress or a Joomla, you will add a template to it, you'll put text, you'll put images, videos, then you will add a captcha API, you will add a social media API, you may add a email API, you may add a payment gateway API, and publish your website based on what is the purpose, the way you'll design it, and all those things. Same way, you can actually publish your own financial services platform. And with fintech getting embedded as part of every industry, this these three frameworks, including FAM, actually empower every other industry today. Right, so there will be consumers and providers or APIs. This will accelerate all those problem issues with respect to go to market and partnerships. Right, and and this is not just a wishful thinking. This is something I am basing on the fact that I have actually worked on many of these. I've seen some of these evolution with respect to some markets. So globally, various countries are creating and wedding it to use cases wherein you can simply pick and choose and compare API. And I have a very quick example. Let's take this example of a college. It'll go to this API marketplace. It'll go and select. So it can either customize its APIs or it'll take up pre-decided suggestions. So let's say the college wants to create a whole platform. It'll go create a complete college platform, and then on the right hand side it will get various functionalities. It will select all the functionalities, then it will click on next. Once it clicks on next, within each of those platforms it will get suggestions of various APIs where it can, it is a very simplified explanation I'm doing. It can compare to see which is the most popular one, pricing wise, availability wise, and there will be, people can give their feedback, comments. And then once they do that, you'll come to a stage where you can test, you can configure, you can personalize, and then you can even publish basically. So this is just a very quick visual illustrations which I picked up from my framework, to give you a feel of what and then obviously there are various things like onboarding, which one of the earlier speaker quickly spoke of. Now, this is how I tie up very quickly. There are three frameworks. One is FDLC, second is which is fintech digital architecture, of a fintech digital lifecycle, which will 7 stages, which will help you creating innovative and engaging user journey, reduce friction in the system, get higher wallet share, which is the core framework. Flare, which is fintech logical architecture, which will help get you better documentation, UI UX articulation, collaboration between players, if or even non-techies to understand. And finally, FAM, to manifest all this in form of a plug and play API, open API marketplace, which will accelerate collaboration and growth, where you can simply pick and choose and publish your solution. These three work in together, but they can also always, all as a framework, they can be practiced in isolation. And the big beauty is they are product and tech agnostic and very easy to understand. Very quickly, we all know that end of the day, customer centric fintech solutions are going to win, and that's what these three frameworks will help you. uh, I've just put this slide for clarity in terms of helping you understand what is the difference between a knowledge and framework, because a lot of us, I've seen this, people mix it up. Knowledge is basically, this is how the clothes are scattered there. You'll So whenever you have to act, pick up a dress and wear, it'll be disorganized, lack of clarity, difficult, wastage. You cannot prioritize, you cannot be timely. Whereas a framework is something like a wardrobe, which will help you better organize and understand. It will help you manage your clothes or knowledge better, right? And you can transform in a big way. So with even so you'll be organized, better clarity, quick to act, prioritize, timely, efficient. And that's where the frameworks like this help. So you don't need too many clothes, but a good wardrobe to dress well regularly. Same way, you don't need too much knowledge, but a very good framework to help you be effective. So typically, as I said, you can get the same edge, which I call as a 3F edge, which is my consulting and training based on 3F Future FinTech framework. Uh, just like how agile methodology helps you with respect to an ability or a thought process to understand and manage a project, same way, Future FinTech framework brings in a very good enhancement in terms of a thought process approach for creating and engaging solutions, fostering collaboration and accelerating growth in a new digital age. which will basically enhance the digital maturity for you, your organization, and your employees. So collaboration is better, success of projects is better. You realize better engagement with customers. Finally, just my last word: creativity is contagious. Pass it on. This is by Albert Einstein. So happy to share. You can share whatever insights you develop quickly through my presentation and my framework. Please share it with others within your organization, within others, and practice possibly by getting a hand on the book, or maybe write to me on futurefintechframework@gmail.com to probably get some more insights in terms of how this framework can help you and your organization. Uh, Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kartik. Speaking of things being contagious, that's the one thing that's contagious that we do want to pass on, the creativity. So I'm interested in the fintech digital lifecycle, because we've all seen sort of customer life cycles, a very general sort of discover, engage, buy. And use, and then recommend. But in financial services, you've brought out some other aspects of that, because of the need to secure the customer information, and
Correct.
and also to be sure about the identity of the customer, and other aspects of that are more specific to building financial products and services. Appreciate that. So there are essentially three models that you introduced: the fintech digital lifecycle, the fintech logical architecture, and I think people are sort of familiar with architecture in general, but the specifics of what layers there are in financial services is important. And I think you made a comment also about you seeing more and more core layers being hollowed out, and I think that reflects the realization in many large financial institutions that there's perhaps been too much functionality built into this monolithic core, and it stifles the ability to innovate and build new products. So they've gradually been hollowing out functionality into other services, in some cases microservices, in order to provide that flexibility and agility to introduce new products and services. And the last part, the API Marketplace, is very, very relevant for the API Days community, because we can all see the value in an API Marketplace to help promote that building block connectivity mindset that will enable us to assemble new products and services from the existing building blocks. So thanks very much for sharing that with us.
Great. I just want to pick one point, maybe a few seconds. You just
Mm,
rightly mentioned the last part is probably something which ties up to the community here. But even the fintech digital life cycle is important even for techies, right? I think the earlier speaker mentioned about how will you orchestrate this as a journey. So
mm,
unless the technologists also try to appreciate and understand how this can be orchestrated, so and that's the mind frame or a structure or a framework or a mindset which this framework called FDLC tries to develop, which is the core
mm,
framework. So I would want to say that it's something relevant for techies, non-techies, not just the
mhm,
API marketplace, which is the concluding
mhm.
plot, which will help you
Yeah.
manifest and create it. Yeah.
Mm. Great. Thanks very much for sharing that. It's a great way to cap off this track.
Thank you, John. Pleasure's mine.